Hi, my name is Carlo Volpe,
And I'm Desmond Silva,
and
and
welcome to
welcome to
Centerville
Centerville
Voice.
Voice.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Centerville Voice. My name is Carlo, and this is my good friend Desmond. How are you, Des?
Okay, how about you, Carlo?
Doing great, my friend. And welcome back, everybody. It's been a little while, but we're back in the action. And this is episode number 31, right?
Right. Yes.
Episode number 31. And we're going to get right back into it. Centerville Voice, we talked about everything left, right, center. Des, I'll let you introduce this topic. It's been a while, but let's just get into it.
Roe v. Wade was just overturned at the U.S. Congress by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yes.
So, what it does is essentially it basically states that the Constitution does not infer that abortion is a constitutional right nor considered a human right. It is, and it pushes the issue from the federal level down to the state level.
Exactly.
The reactions to this have been quite obvious.
Yeah.
On the pro-abortion side, they have been totally miserable and very upset about this.
Yeah.
While on the pro-life side, they have been extremely very, very happy about this.
Yeah. This is seen as a very big win, right, for the pro-life side.
Exactly.
And I can see how it is. My thing with it is like I'm honestly torn. I'm not torn in one sense because I feel like, I'm not a woman, but also I'm torn because my idea of the whole idea, or my opinion, I guess, has changed a lot over the years. But what makes me more angry is like we were talking about just before we started, but how certain people are excluded from the conversation. And let's talk about that too. Like automatically I hear online or even just in certain circles, like, well, if you don't have a uterus, you don't have a say.
No.
And like, well, I have a lot of issues with that because it's like saying, because you're not experiencing something, you can't have an opinion on it. And that doesn't make sense for me because ethics are ethics and morals are morals. And whether something's legal or not, it shouldn't matter just if you have like what was the example I gave you before? Like if I were to beat up a man or kill a man, murder a man, another man, it's not like a woman couldn't have an opinion on whether it's right or wrong because she doesn't have testicles, so she can't relate. So it's nothing like that. I equate it kind of like that, but what do you think? Is that crazy or
no? It's not crazy. I'm like, we made that same issue. Like if if just because I'm brown or I'm South Asian doesn't mean I can't critique Italian food, and just because you're Italian doesn't mean that you can't critique South Asian food, right? Or Sri Lankan food in the case of my ancestry, right? So it's ridiculous to say that, okay, you don't have an opinion on this now, because the thing is, anyone can learn about something, right?
Yeah.
You can always learn, and there's certain things that guys may not understand about what women, and there's certain things that women don't understand about men.
Sure.
But you can always learn. But when it comes to ethical issues,
yeah,
there is a fairly objective right or wrong on the vast majority of these situations.
Well, let's talk about that because I think a lot of people look at the topic of abortion or the issue of abortion that it's not a black or white, right? That it is gray area. And the problem I find with that is that when you really dig into the gray area, or when you dig into the area where people reserve for the gray area, for their judgment, it's such a small area, and it's hard to really make sense of it. And what I'm trying to say is, like, when people say like they're against it, but or they're for it because of the cases of abortion or rape or incest or health of the mother, right? Those are the most three, right? Like that itself, I'm not against it for any of those reasons, right? I'm not against it, and I don't even know if I'm against it for any other reason. But my point is that itself, I think, when that sort of takes away from the big picture, does it not? It's like
it does, because
it's a distraction almost to me. I don't understand.
The whole situation as it is in the United States and Canada is that the whole purpose of having an abortion has been severely abused, very abused.
It's changed a lot, right? One can
Changed
say
a lot,
but you can say abused, I guess, too. You're right.
It has been abused because originally, if you go back 60 years, the whole purpose of it was in the case of rape, incest, and if mother's life was in danger. And even back then, they used to question that, right?
Okay.
Because of the fact that you're dealing with two individual human lives. And back then they understood that. And it's still, every single biologist understands that.
Everybody should know that.
Any biologist worth their salt understands that from the moment of conception, you have every single human trait or every single trait, biological trait that determines who you are biologically it's already there. Your skin color, your eye color, your hair color, your sexual your sex, your whether you have a disability or not, whether you are having a pre-existing condition or not. This, your nose, how what your nose looks like, ears look like, everything. It determines everything.
Yeah.
And that DNA that's in there that determines all of that is unique to you.
Yeah.
And even in the case of twins, there are going to be small differences, right?
Oh,
that are there.
For sure. But so the thing is where I don't get is where, when we're saying about the small percentages of the rape, incest, mother's health, what was the percentage? You were talking about numbers earlier.
About 1%.
Okay.
There's less than 1%. If you combine the mother's health, instance of the mother's health being at a risk, particularly where the mother's health is at risk and you can't save both mother and child.
Okay.
Rape and incest.
So sorry to catch up. Let's talk about the other 99%, or even let's say 98%, right? I mean, there's no other way to say it rather than it's just the person wants to terminate the pregnancy, right? There's no other easy way to say it than that. Now, why don't we ever talk about the fact that why is it only okay to end a life? I mean, I'm just being objective. Why is it okay to end a life in the womb but not outside of it? We don't talk about that.
But the fact of the matter is that the more liberal government of the Democrats in New York were actually moving towards that. Even CNN started calling newborn infants newborn fetuses in order to try and take their humanity away. So to say that that is something that did not happen or would not happen is not true, because it would actually happen. And as a matter of fact, if it weren't for Donald Trump, that would have happened. He stopped it. And the thing is that the idea that this is a progressive idea is ridiculous, because they've had this type of practices in ancient Japan. They've had this in ancient Greece. These are very, very old ancient ideas. And even the reasoning that they have back then was very similar to the reasoning that liberals have now.
Which is, what's the big reasoning?
Well, they would say that the child is not human, or the child or they would basically try to say, in Japan, they would always say that a child is closer to being in the spiritual realm than it is in the human realm, in the realm of the living. So it's okay for the child to be killed, even after birth.
So it's justification. Yeah.
So it's a form of justice. It's a justification to kill a child, basically kill one who is weak and cannot stand for themselves, cannot speak for themselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
So where do we get, what happened? I mean, because Roe V Wade, I mean, that's not Canada, right? That's the US.
No,
but our laws have changed over the years in Canada as well. But I mean, this is a big thing. This is a big thing, reversing Roe V Wade. And let's again go back to just laying it out. This puts now the onus, or this puts the responsibility or the authority on the state level in the United States, away from the federal government and to the state, which I think every other medical decision is essentially made in the state level.
Yes. And it should be run that way. As a matter of fact, a lot of social issues like that should be run from the bottom up. Because the United States is a federation, right? Yeah. And in the case of every single state has different views on various things. They're not the same.
Because it is at the state level, it's handled like I said, other healthcare issues. There's a lot of things that are handled at the state level. Very few, especially in the US, that are handled at the federal level. But here's the problem that I think people that are pro-choice or pro-abortion, right? This is the problem that they have with it, is that they're saying it should be a fundamental right to be able to have an abortion. And we need to talk about that. Where does that come from? Why is it a fundamental right that someone as an American citizen should have the right to abort their baby? Where did that even come from?
It's about normalization of certain types of thinking and behavior. If you look back,
even if I'm pro-choice, or sorry, even if I'm pro-abortion, right?
Yes.
How did they get this to? I don't understand.
Well, it's like it started off first with with the small cases where, the small one percentage that was there,
Okay.
and then it's started to escalate from there. And event now the
The lobby
point,
groups.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Now, the typical normal reaction after having an abortion is one of mourning, right? That's normal, right?
I would imagine. Yeah. I would
That
imagine.
where basically like I know a couple of women who have gone through abortion, and I've talked with them about this. They've given names to the child, they have given the child proper burial, and they mourn the child, and they hold that child in memory, which that's what you would expect of any normal individual to actually, or anyone who has any type of humanity in them,
I bet that doesn't
that
happen
way.
though.
But there are lots of people now who are literally celebrating their abortions. There are women now who are going so far as to have cakes and saying abortion is normal. There's nothing normal about
Wow.
killing a baby,
Yeah. So
right?
how do we separate? How do we make sense? How do we, like, literally guys like me and you, even women like you, that I know and that you know, our wives and everything, like, how do we separate, and how do you legislate? Okay, how do you legislate the difference between the 1 or 2% and everybody else? Like,
Well, I think that a lot of Republican
because it's such a
states,
tough conversation for people,
yeah,
right?
I know, but there's a lot of Republican states that are bringing it back to how it was 60 years ago, where where basically it's a ban on abortion, except in cases where the mother's life is in danger, in case of rape or incest. That's
Okay.
it, right?
So yeah. So let's be devil's advocate. Okay. Why should you have a right to have an abortion?
Why should you have a right to have an abortion?
Yeah, like, like,
Save your life is one thing,
yeah.
right? Just say, because let's say you're in a situation where your life is in danger
Yep.
and
Okay.
the baby's life cannot be saved either. Now you're in a state of a situation where you have to choose between saving one person's life or the other. Now there are a lot of mothers who will choose to say, who give up their lives in order to save their baby, right? Which honestly
Oh,
I think is really admirable,
but
because
yeah.
that shows like a true mother's nature, a
Yeah.
really real true maternal instinct to sacrifice yourself for your young. And I think
But
and
that's
that's
that.
something
A
that,
lot of people would argue that's a bad decision too, right? So it's,
well,
yeah.
that's again, that's what a lot of people may think, right? But then again, there are plenty of fathers who would do just as well, who do just the same thing,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, I mean,
But
and
me and
equally,
you,
the arguments could be, save the mother, and save the mother, right? I mean, and you can have
yes,
more children or whatever. I'm not even saying just for that reason, but for the reason that the mother is the life, the mother is the spouse, the mother is the person that's
yes,
lived their life. Yeah, I
yes.
know what you mean,
And there are a lot of
but
people who will argue that, right?
for sure.
So again, that's why
What?
they have this, that's kind of one of those shaky type of, balancing acts that you have to decide,
Okay,
what.
but I want to hear the hard argument. I want to hear the argument of, like, of why should you have an abortion if it's not one of those circumstances? Like,
That's the problem, is that
you shouldn't.
there
Is what
is
you're saying.
no real logical reason outside that other than convenience,
Yeah. So
objectively
also,
speaking.
and also, I, it's such a tough conversation because even if we talk to someone who is for saying, like, the 1% or the 2%, right, and then they expand that to say, okay, what about the other 98%? It's hard for people to now say. I would imagine it's hard for people to agree with us when we say, okay, well, it's murder. Well, if it's not murder, what is it? And I'm
Mhm.
not saying it is. I'm not calling people murderers and all this stuff. I'm just, just this is what the whole idea of the podcast, right? Is to throw these ideas out and throw these conversations out. But ending the life, at what point is it murder? Because I think we would get most people under the sun to agree that a 1 year old is murder,
Yeah.
and even a 1 day old, most people would probably agree
But
that it's
then what's
murder.
the difference between, how about a 1 minute old or 1 second old?
You're right. And this is the conversation that most people don't have, I think.
They
Most
don't.
people I know that I haven't had this conversation with them because honestly, I'm afraid to have this conversation. It's so hot.
Yes. And the thing is, a lot of people will call the pro-life abortion bans and all that stuff archaic. They'll call them draconian, but the truth of the matter is, it's actually the reverse that's true, right? Because if you look at the way of thinking, okay, and if you look at the way of thinking of slave traders, of the people who colonized other countries in and put people into made people into slaves, like the South American natives,
Okay.
right? How they were made slaves and their lands taken away from them by the Portuguese and the Spanish, right?
Yeah.
And how the slave traders there came up to even the bishops and tried to argue that a child a native child who could sing Ave Maria as beautifully as any white boy or white girl, right?
Yeah.
Like a choir, like a beautiful choir child. And this and they would play and behave like anyone else. They were human. They were
Yeah.
obviously human beings.
100%.
But according to the slave trader, they were like parrots and they had no soul.
So, like you were saying, the attempt on removing personhood
Exactly. The attempt
makes it
on
justify the choices.
to justify the choice. And that's the biggest problem. Is
Oh, that's
that,
heavy, man. That's hard.
yeah, this is where the whole draconian idea that personhood can be inferred on an individual is so backwards, because
Yeah.
it's the same thing that the idea of an individual having a soul, okay, that is just trying to debate whether an
Yeah.
individual has a soul. And so infer personhood, that one individual human has the ability to infer or give personhood onto
Yeah.
another, is dead wrong.
Yeah.
It is pure evil.
Well, it's
That is what we saw in slavery. In the slave trade, it was big time that this happened. In colonization, it was big time. Anytime there was a war between two nations, the one side would always try to dehumanize the other, so that the soldiers would have the idea that, oh, these people are the villains, these people are the bad guys, let's go and kill them,
the
so
others.
our nation can prosper.
Yeah, the other, exactly. Well, and like you said, like this ties into a lot of things that we were saying about like postmodernism and the far left and the dangers of where this can go. Is like, if we make so many labels and so many names and so many nouns and pronouns and all these things, right? You are removing personhood eventually, right? You're taking out the any essence or even attempt of saying a soul, right? Exactly. How can you?
According to genetics, according to biology, every single human being on this earth is a human from the moment of conception, all the way through to natural death, and their body are still the body of a human being after death.
So a 10-week gestation, a 20-week gestation, a 30-week gestation, I mean, there's really, on the grand scheme of things, there's not much different at all.
There isn't very much different. They're still human.
Well, and it's funny, it's not funny, but the difficult part is that when you go through the different states and different laws in different countries, there are countries and states, let's just use states, regions around the world that will allow up to 12 weeks, allow up to 25 weeks, allow up to almost up to full term. I don't know any places that can allow up to full term, but I'm sure there are places pushing it these days.
There is one doctor in the United States, one doctor left, who would actually do a third trimester abortion. And the guy has a target on his back for a lot of people. The truth of the matter is, well, I don't mean to say that it's good that what he's doing. And I honestly said that I don't think that putting a target on this man's head with a gun is the answer. That's the worst possible thing, because the moment you resort to violence, that's when you lose that's when you lose the battle.
Well, exactly. And this thing is like, if we're saying we're against murder, then or against all life being lost, then we should be against all life being lost. You're right. Yeah.
Right. So no one should go around targeting anybody. No. Okay. And now, before the left goes around saying, oh yeah, it's only the anti-abortionists that are doing these violent situations, these violent acts. The truth of the matter is just very recently, after Roe V Wade was overturned, or it was overturned, right?
Okay.
There was a Christian pregnancy center which was burnt down. Someone committed arson against it.
Yeah.
There were slogans, and it was obvious this was done by pro-abortion activists, because they had written on the side of the wall, "My body, my choice," or "Keep your bands off my body," right? And if abortion cannot be safe, neither are you.
Yeah. I don't understand. And this is almost, it's funny, during COVID and during all the vaccinations and all this stuff, I kept on saying, like, where is my choice and all this stuff? But I knew this time would come again, that the other my choice when it comes to, pro-choice and abortion, everything will come around. But I'm reminded again, okay, the same people who are okay with killing a baby, right, weren't okay with me not wanting to take a shot. Like, I don't understand. Like, they were saying,
Yes.
no, you should be forced to take this medicine you don't want, but don't force me to let's just be honest. Like, they don't want to deal with their own consequences of their actions, but I was forced to, or I was threatened to deal with the consequences of my actions, which, let's remind myself, my action wasn't starting a life. My action was just going to work and doing whatever. So I'm reminded again, like, just the inconsistency of the, where's the logic, is what I'm trying to say, right?
There isn't. It's actually very hypocritical that the way that they're handling this thing. And the thing is that,
again, I'm not judging anybody, right? But I'm just like,
but whether you like it or not, and the thing is, I've debated this issue for years, and what I found is that there is not a single pro-abortion argument that actually holds water. Not a single one.
Yeah.
Because every single one of them can be debunked. The biggest one, and one of the biggest flaws with that, if you ask any person who is pro-abortion, or so they like to call pro-choice, not a single one of them can agree upon when life starts.
That's true.
All of them are all over the place. But you look at the pro-choice, you look at the pro-lifers are all consistent that life starts at conception.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Right? There are maybe some very rare fringe ones that are off there that have different ideas, but if you look at 99% of pro-lifers right across the board, they are all giving the same answer. Okay, that life begins at conception, right? There are people who believe on the pro-abortion side, it's, life begins at your first breath. Life begins when sentience begins.
Some people heartbeat,
when the brain activity starts. Life begins
heartbeat.
at various different scenarios that are there, right?
Or life. That's the problem, is that you get lost in the weeds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like it's semantics, and you're arguing over things, and in the meanwhile, we're like, wait a second, let's have this big question again. Let's zoom out, 30,000 feet above, and let's say, what's going on here, right? And let's say, what's the big question? Why are we doing it, or is it right or wrong? And again, I can't help but go back to the idea that, like, it's not, it should be okay for everybody to talk about this, right? This is like, it should be okay. So I don't know. It's just,
yes. And then there are a lot of people who are like center left who are a little bit more reasonable, but the ones that are on the far left, they're not making any sense whatsoever. And I've seen, I've watched CNN and even the CBC has shown their left-wing bias in this matter, and so I'm basically treating abortion as a human right, which I find almost ridiculous, because they might as well have a human right to go and kill a child in that case. That's not a human right. Human right, you don't have the right to kill someone because they're an inconvenience to you, or because of your own convenience. That's the same logic that the slave traders had when they tried to enslave the people that they enslaved, right?
Yeah, no, this hits me different now, man. I got to tell you, like, it's not just having kids, it's not just getting older. Maybe it's all of that, but it's also maybe just looking at the world going, like, we got to reevaluate everything. You get to that point, maybe your 30s or 40s, where, like, you're questioning everything anyway. So you're like, what the hell is going on here? And, like, you're right. How is it a human right to end your baby's life. Like the term, we've taken what is a human right and we've bastardized it.
Yep.
Perfect term. We have bastardized because we've like this doesn't mean that anymore, right?
No.
An actual human right, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and all this stuff, like preservation of life, conservation of life, would make more sense than.
Yep.
Right?
And here's the thing: is the forefathers of the United States of America, and even those who wrote the charter of the in Canada when they wrote the Charter of Rights.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at both of them, the first two rights are the right to life first, liberty second.
Yeah.
And then in the United States, the pursuit of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
In Canada, it is security.
Yeah.
That's the third one. That's the only one that differs, right?
Yeah.
But the other two are consistent among both countries.
Yeah.
And it's in that order for a reason. Without life, you don't have a right to anything else. You can't have anything else because you're dead or you don't exist, right? Yeah,
and your life, your right to freedom can't supersede someone else's life, right to life.
Exactly. Your right to freedom can't supersede someone else's right to life. Right?
But why? And I don't know. Is it the same? Is it the same movement? Is that same vein of politics over the years that's gone left? It's gone the. Is that's this the same movement that's gone?
Yeah, see, that's why if you look at the case where the mother's life is in danger, and you can't say both mother and child, now you're dealing with two people's lives. Yeah. Now you have to decide whose life to save, because now you're dealing with the individual life of both.
That's right.
That's why in that situation, you got to try and make a choice. It's just like if you have a firefighter and there are two people in different sides of the building, both of them have equal value in terms of life, but the firefighter can only reach one of them in time and before the blaze goes out. So he has to make a choice. He or she has to make a choice. Yeah. Am I going to go to save the person on one side, or am I going to save the person on the other side? Either way, one's going to live and the other is going to die. Yeah. And that's why that situation is there, right? But in the case of where you have any other situation, right?
So most abortions, let's be honest, most of them, and let's throw that statistic up again. I mean, we talked about it years ago, or a while ago, but the last I checked, I think it was 2020 or 2021 statistics, was that over 80,000 abortions are performed in Canada. Yes. And if generally the statistic of the 1 or 2% is the same in Canada, I'm sure it's close in the state in Canada and US, right?
Yes.
That's a heck of a lot of abortions that are essentially elective. And the term elective, or the term for inconvenience or convenience, like that's really insulting to a lot of people. But unfortunately, I mean, when you're talking about right or wrong, you can't worry about someone's feelings for a second. You have to talk about what's right or wrong, right?
Exactly.
And when did feelings become more important than life too? Like let's be honest.
Yeah.
Right. So like, how do we make sense of this? Because we can't talk about this forever. How do we make sense of this, right? Like, and as men too, like we like bloody hell, we need to be able to have an opinion.
You have to be able to. Otherwise, the thing is, if let's put it this way, if
as women should, as everybody needs to have an opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and let's put it this way, right? One big argument is that even though Christians are not the only ones who are pro-life, there are atheists who are also pro-life as well. People go around saying, why should Christians push their beliefs on others in order to, in this particular issue? Well, I go back at them and ask, do you think slavery is right? Was slavery a good thing? Because it was Christian nations that ended slavery.
Yeah.
Slavery was an international industry. Okay. And there were actually more slaves in India than there were in the United States. One of the last countries to end slavery was Nigeria. And the thing, there are people who live today in their 20s whose grandparents were slave traders and slave owners. Wow. There's actually, I'll leave a link in the description below, but there is a a documentary about a young Nigerian man who is the curator of a makeshift museum, or actually a historic, not a museum, but a historical site of an actual slave trade depot, or essentially what it was considered like a depot for it, where all the slaves arrived and they put them in the instruments of bondage, etc. And so, but he and his family have inherited this, and they're the ones who are the curators of this historical site. But how did his family end up having this? Well, turns out his grandfather was a slave owner and a slave trader. Mm-hmm. And he traded slaves from other African nations, right? Mm-hmm. So,
oh yeah, I mean, it was all over the world for sure.
It was international, and it's the British, not the Americans. It was the Brit, and I know there's a lot of people who would say, yeah, the British did this wrong. Yeah, of course, they're not perfect. Nobody's perfect, and there are people who are going to do right and wrong. Well, let's give credit where credit is due. It is the British who fought a 100-year battle on multiple fronts, and they were the ones who were first to end slavery throughout every single British colony. Okay, wow. By buying out every single slave, they bought them out and gave them all their freedom, and then banned slavery in the British Empire. Wow. And that's no longer any slavery in British colony, in former British colonies or in the Commonwealth. The French were next, but the British brought the French on board next.
Well, so to your point, then it was the Christians, right, and other religions, of course, right? Christians, I'm sure Jews are against it. I'm sure Muslims are against it. I'm sure a lot of other religions.
Well, no, Muslims weren't against it. The Muslims were for it.
but these days, Islam, I don't think.
Well, these days, if you look at more modern forms of less ultra conservative versions of Islam. Okay. Especially in North America, yeah, they're not going to condone slavery. But if you look
slavery, abortion. Sorry.
But if you look at how they treat people from other nations,
sorry, not slavery, abortion. I'm saying.
Oh, abortion. Yeah. Abortion, they're against. Yeah,
of course. That's what I'm saying.
Are against abortion. Jews are against abortion.
Yeah,
there's a lot of
most religions I've ever heard of were against.
They're all against abortion, right? But the thing is to say that why should one particular religious community force their views on everyone else when it comes to the issue of abortion? Again, like I said, it was Christian nations that ended slavery internationally, and they're the ones who started it. That had no benefit to themselves. Ending slavery internationally had no benefit to anyone internationally as far as nations went. Mm-hmm. The amount of effort that was there to end slavery was huge, and the sacrifices. People died to end slavery.
Well, and that's a good point though, because there are nations around the world that it's, to bring it back to abortion, because we got to wrap it up. But like there are nations around the world that it's against the law to have abortion, right? It is, and there are and most of them that have laws for it or they allow it have some sort of stipulation, right? Like a certain term or gestation or whatever, but. I don't know. I mean, like, how do we it's hard. It's a difficult conversation to talk to people. Right. And because for me, maybe it's because I'm a man. And if I speak to a woman about it, like I said, honestly, 20 years ago, I would have said, hey, I don't have a choice. Or not only that, I would have said, I don't have a say. I don't have an opinion, whatever. And I was single, and I was in a different point in my life where I wasn't ready to have a family. So I was probably okay with the idea, maybe, right? More so than today. And then there was one point where I thought, well, maybe I didn't have an opinion at all because I'm a man. I wasn't allowed, honestly. But now again, I'm starting to think, wait a second, I'm starting to scratch my head, right? Like, of course I have an opinion. I'm not an idiot. So, but my thing is, how do we talk to people? Because this is going to be the thing is we say, okay, how do we bridge that gap? How do we talk to people about the 98% of abortions that happen?
Yes.
The 2% or the 1%, that's a conversation that can be summed up in a second, but then the next question is, okay, well, if we all agree on this, then are you okay with a law against it for the rest? And that never goes that way, right? That conversation always then goes, well, it should be a woman's choice. So how do we talk about it? Because I don't know the right answer. I'm not passing judgment, but what do we like?
I think the biggest problem is whole problem is stemming from the sexual revolution that started in the 60s. Because what happened is it changed women's ideas from wait until marriage to go have fun. You can behave like a man, which is just dead wrong. You can't, right? Men
Right.
get pregnant, women do. So there's a
Men
more reason for a woman to be wary about having sex than it is for a man, right?
You're
And
right.
that may seem unfair,
You're
but
right.
it's
But even just to put a pin in that, you're right. Like it's in all likelihood, what you're right, whether it's fair or not, of course it's more risky for a woman.
yeah.
Right? Of course. But now the danger in saying that is that there's a presumed male chauvinist now, or not presumed, but there's a flavor of chauvinism, right? That comes out that says, are you supposing that it's only the woman's responsibility? Right? I'm not trying to give
It
attitude, but
isn't. No, it's the man's responsibility too.
that's right. That's the problem.
Right?
That's
It
what was
is.
left out. And I think
And
this women's lib
yes.
push was I think women were sold a bad bill in one sense because they were told the idea that it has nothing to do with the man, but no, it does have something to do
It
with
has
the
to do a lot with the guy.
there was a
As a
man who
matter of
started
fact,
it.
a lot of abortions that are a lot of people when they want abortions to occur, those abortions are actually forced upon the woman by her male partner, either boyfriend or husband. So to say this is a woman's right, well, guess what? It's also being used as a man's right to shag whoever he wants, wherever he wants, without consequence, without taking proper precautions. And then she gets pregnant and okay, get rid of it.
Yeah.
What type of guy does that?
Well, a jerk. A
A
jerk.
jerk,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. If you are not ready to have a child, don't have sex, whether you're male or female.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I agree with you.
But ladies need to be very, very careful because there are a lot of jerk guys out there, okay, who don't give a care. They don't care about the responsibility, and they will play you, and they will target you and use you, and they will try to just have their fun and then dump you. Okay.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think the correlation is, or what do you think the effect of the numbers is to the amount of because when the availability of abortions as abortion becomes more available and easier to do over the years and over the years and over the years, what there's more breakups, there's more single moms, there's more that's crazy. You would almost think that that would solve these issues, right?
No, and abortion hasn't solved any of those issues.
No, exactly. They don't certainly hasn't solved any issues. In fact, who is it solving an issue for? I don't think it's solving anybody's issue, other than, like you said, if it's inconvenient for someone, then it's solving that. But it's not pulling people out of poverty. But like you said, it's not pulling people out of poverty, so it's not doing anything great.
Yeah, it's not helping with poverty. And if you look at a lot of the cases where they do go through with the child and the guy does stick around, you see what happens is a level of maturity that they didn't have before after they have the child.
Sure.
Because now they have responsibility.
We all grow up.
Right? So there is this one article, I think you seen in the Washington Post or the New York Times. I don't remember which one, but I'll put it up. But they try to they take this one case where there's this young girl, this one young woman who she was dropped out of high school. She was taking her real estate license, and she was involved with a boy for about a month, and she got pregnant. And eventually she went, and so this was just before, I think it was Texas had a heartbeat law being put in, right? Her particular state was having a heartbeat law being put in, and it was going to be put in the next couple of days. So when she went to the clinic, she was accepted by a lady who was actually a pro-life person, and she went and showed her. So she went through the whole steps of explaining about abortions and all that, but she didn't explain abortions in the way that a pro-abortionist would explain. He started explaining all the side effects, or problems or complications that can happen when having an abortion, including death, right? Perforation of the uterus and all that stuff like that, and that this does happen, right?
Yeah, of course.
Then they went in, and showed they showed her baby on an ultrasound, and the moment that she saw the baby, she chose to keep the child. That the newspaper though, right? The media for that, they stated that this was a terrible thing that she had chosen instead of having that they had deceived her into choosing to keep the child instead of having an abortion.
Wow.
Right? Now she's going to keep the child, right? Eventually, she has twins.
Yeah.
Her boyfriend was practically a bum. He was like a skater bum, right? He manned up. Good. He stuck with her.
Okay. Yep.
And what did he do? He joined the Air Force.
Okay.
He joined the military.
Yeah.
Became a soldier, and he started living a life of discipline and responsibility. And
Responsibility.
yeah, he manned up. Okay,
Yeah.
and they made this out to be a bad thing.
Yeah.
Which
Well,
is
that's crazy, and that's what, like we were saying a second ago. Like, I think it could all be summed up with like trying to. And this is another example of the government or the state trying to say, it's not your responsibility. Let us do it, or you can get out of this, or you can get out of anything. And it's almost like, it's an idea of what's going on with our society. There's so many wrong things. There's so many things that are like, not wrong things, but like, so many passes. So many people have so many passes, right? Like the bar is so low on something where I don't think that that's necessarily the case with this. So the bar should be high, but there has to be a discussion around responsibility, right? And it's not about only being the responsibility of the woman. And I think that was also a bad thing. It's like we were saying about, no, it's not about the responsibility of the woman. It's the responsibility of the men. And if more men were, I can't only think of education, like we're saying, education, responsibility, and more support. And I think that's the better solution, right?
We need to teach young men, we need to teach young boys how to be real men.
Yeah.
Right. We've taken that away because of the modern left wing type of thinking, where men and women are equal. They're not. But there's not that they're different. They're not the same, or that women are the same, right? Different. They're not the same. They're different. Men and women function differently. They think differently, and they do better in different things.
100%. I think one of the problems with the world too is that like we're making kids grow up faster. In one ways we think they are, but really we're not. In a lot of ways we're actually developing, or we're delaying their development, making them grow up later, right? But at the same time they're having sex earlier.
So yeah, that's the problem. The only thing that they're doing is they're just allowing children to be sexualized, right? Blame Kinsey, right? Alfred Kinsey, the guy, the father of the sexual revolution, the total pervert, right? And who that guy literally consorted with pedophiles. And he basically hypothesized, or basically tried to prove that children at age 3 could have orgasm or have sexual pleasure. And it's like,
that's terrible.
Yeah. And he took notes on this, and instead of turning in this sexual predator this child predator into authorities, he kept him anonymous, protected him, and allowed him to continue on with these kids, and started using them for his research. This is where the root of it comes from, the whole left-wing sexual revolution, and where we are today with, men can be women, women can be men, and all that stuff, and the sexualization of children started back then with Kinsey, right?
Well, if there's any message that we need to leave, Des, I think is the message of like you said, responsibility. But it's the same thing that Jordan Peterson talks about, same thing that a lot of these people on the conservative side are talking about. And I agree. It's like, we have to take our responsibilities. We have to man up. Men have to be men and be fathers, have to be men, right? And women have to be women and be mothers, or if they choose to. If you're not a woman, if you're not a mother, that's fine. You still be a woman without a mother, without being a mother. And if you're a man,
but it's about responsibility, becoming an adult, growing up.
Exactly.
That's what
and whether man or woman. So, and it's funny because somewhere along the world, or somewhere along the way, the government even jumped on board. And it's weird. They kind of did it subtly, but they jumped on board with this whole sexual revolution government, because they almost encouraged all of this. It seems like somewhere down the road, right? Like, an abortion I don't know. It just seems like it's making it right or making it easier for everything. But we do have to wrap it up. How do we teach people about responsibility? How do we remind them?
Well,
Like,
first of all, for those
church is a good way.
for those people who are really thinking that abortion is right, I suggest that they look up Dr. Anthony Levatino. Dr. Anthony Levatino is a atheist doctor who has performed hundreds of abortions. So this guy is an expert on this particular topic. He stopped eventually because he realized that what he was doing was wrong. One day he looked at parts of the child that he had just aborted, and he decided, this is just wrong. I'm not doing the right thing. This is someone's son or daughter. Here's what he saw, not just parts on a tray. He gives a very detailed explanation of what first trimester, second trimester, and third trimester abortions are. Okay, DNC abortions, what it does, right? So that dilation and dilation and where they basically dilate the cervix and basically evacuate everything out, right? It is very, very barbaric procedure.
Yes, it's quite a procedure for sure.
And so I know there's a lot of young folks that I've spoken to on this issue, like when young folks, I mean, like 18, 19 years old.
Yeah.
They're like saying, oh, abortion is good, abortion is good. And I'm like, watch this first, then tell me abortion is good. And the last fellow that I talked to about this, he thought abortion was like, the room was just, there was just material a lot. No, it's not just material on the lining. No. And he saw that and he's like, I have to mull this over. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So
all right.
Consider that. Consider the humanity of the individual who is being conceived, and also think about your own responsibility. If you're not ready to have a child, don't have sex, period.
All right. That's it, folks. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. Des, thanks again, my friend. It's been a pleasure.
You too, Carlo. You take care. We'll see you all in the next video.
All right. Peace, guys. Cheers.
Thanks for joining in and watching Centerville Voice. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you are seeing this on YouTube, make sure you click on the notifications bell so you get notified when we upload new videos, which we release every Friday. Sharing and liking our videos helps promote the channel, and sharing episodes like these helps get the word out so that more people will get to see our videos. If you like what you see and or hear, please consider becoming one of our Patreon supporters. 10% of all Patreon supporter donations we receive goes to our charity of the year. You can visit us at centervillevoice.com to learn more and engage with us on one of our social media pages. Thanks for your support, and we will see you again in our next video or podcast.